Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Social Housing Roundtable. Welcome to some new faces, some familiar ones. Like I say, to those who can only come intermittently, it's nice to see you all. For those who don't know me, my name is Matthew Baird. I've been doing social housing recruitment now for nearly 12 years. I got nicknamed by one of my clients last year the ethical social housing recruiter, and have tried to pretend like that is the greatest thing that's ever been. So love that as a mantle. But one thing I do know from those who have worked within the room and those who've worked with me over the last kind of 2.5 years since I've set up on my own is that I do try to make sure that if you really care about housing, then you're the people I want to be working with. This is the Social Housing Roundtable. It was set up during the first lockdown, again, not long after I set up on my own, with the idea to bring people together who properly care about housing, who also admit it needs to change, who understand that there are problems maybe within the sector, some of which are cultural, some of which are economical, and some of which are in that broad term of other, and want to kind of discuss topics more candidly than maybe we sometimes get to. I don't, when it comes to these roundtables, I don't mind if you're a housing assistant or a support worker or someone who's brand new to housing, has been in the sector a week, or if you're a chief exec with 20 years experience. Your voices on this are equal, and they always will be. And I want to make sure that stays that way. And that's why they're always free. So if anyone wants to get involved or anything like that, please do spread the word. This community's got now over 500 people, 600 people, which is absolutely incredible, but growing all the time. And I hope to see many of you at the CIH conference in the Southwest next month down in Bristol. As I say, this has grown and grown, and because of that, I get to have conversations with people that I've not really met before. And not maybe come across. And Tom Norris is one of those. We somehow hadn't had a conversation, even though we're on a number of the same kind of paths. Hadn't had that conversation until maybe a couple of months ago. And we got talking about a topic which has come up on these roundtables a number of times, which is that, to put it candidly, and this isn't true, but a conversation has come up before, if big housing providers don't care as much as community-based housing providers. Big housing providers give housing officers too big a patch. There's too much spread. They don't have the ability to properly do their role. They're more focused on the money than anything else. And Tom and I got to talking about the work that he did when he was in Scotland, and now that he's kind of come down to our side of the border, as it were. And I'll leave him to go through his story and everything else in a moment. But it was a really, really important topic that as soon as we got talking, I said, look, this has to come to the roundtable, because there is a way to make it work. There are ways that big providers can have a better community influence. And there's also a realization of the difference it can make for customers and tenants alike. So, and even from a recruitment side, from a staff perspective, the difference that's made in terms of retention and things like that. So I'm going to pause there and pass over to Tom to introduce himself, introduce the topic today. I do want this to be a big open chat, so feel free to either introduce yourselves in the chat if you wish to, but equally, as we go through, 5 questions in the chat if you don't want to kind of raise your hand and come into it. But if you are feeling comfortable to do so, please use the raise hand function. I'll bring you into the conversation. The more voices we can get on this today, the better. So without further ado, Tom, I will pass over to yourself. Thank you very much for joining today.
Thank you, Matt, and yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I promise you guys, it's nothing to do with the fact we both have good quality beards that we've decided to talk about this today. No, huge privilege for me. Lovely to meet you all. I'll give you a wee bit of a background just about how I ended up doing what I'm doing, and then talk a little bit about where we're at with Places People, some of the lessons that we've gone through over the last few years, and kind of where we're at now, and what we're trying to do. So. I've not got a particularly long housing background. I've been in the sector about 5 years. Before then, I studied music at university, ended up working in the railway for a bit, worked in Edinburgh with the trams when it went well, by the way, not the dodgy bit, and did a bit of private sector work. And I think there was a moment of time a few years ago when I kind of woke up in the morning and thought, creating value for shareholders really isn't something that I'm particularly interested in. So, ended up, people say that they kind of landed in housing. I didn't. It was quite an active decision to come and join the sector. And I've had a huge privilege to to be involved in the way I have since then. So I joined PFP about 5 years ago. Quite a different organisation to the one that it is now, but nevertheless doing some really cool stuff. And a few years ago, I ended up being managing director of Places for People Scotland, our landlord north of the border. Not that you would know by my accent, but I promise you, I was born and bred in Scotland. I then moved to England and lost it. And that really opened my eyes, I think, into how provided the scale of Places for People can really do the right thing in our communities and work at a scale which is you get the benefits of scale, I should say, but also you can work on an individual level with tenants. So a brief overview of PFP in terms of where we are now. We're made up of a number of mergers. So the kind of core was North British Housing. And then over the years, two landlords merged in Scotland and joined the group. That was Castle Rock and Edinburgh at the time. It's now Places for People Scotland. Chorus, Derwent, Cotman landlords also joined the group a few years ago. So we're spread geographically all over the UK. We are as far south as Cornwall, as far north as Aberdeen, but we do have strong presences in the regions, if you like, across the UK, where we've got an awful lot of properties. We're about 72,000 or thereabouts on the affordable or social rent side, depending on how you look at it. So that's where we're at. Now, I joined 5 years ago, so post all of these mergers that I've talked about, and the business was set up in a way which was, I suppose, your traditional owning group with subsidiary businesses running their areas in the way they always have. So we didn't have the same systems. So data was very challenging at a group level. We had lots of different ways of working. Not that the ways of working were necessarily wrong, but we were just doing things in different ways in different parts of the UK because of the kind of historical legacy, I suppose, that we had in those businesses. And like I said, the performance was, small areas that we had, big areas we had, it was just different. So we took the view, this was pre-COVID, I should say, to start to try and look at the business and look at how best we can operate in a way which really delivers for our customers. And I'll just pause at that point, and I want to tell you a little bit of a story of an experience I had. Now, some of you may have heard this because I'm pulling out the same story I pulled out in the CIH Scotland talk that I did, but it's very relevant to this discussion. So we had, and many of you will have heard these kind of stories before. We had one of our customers come through the homeless route in Scotland with really complex needs, and it was in one of our core locations in Edinburgh, and we didn't have enough information, I think, or understanding of the complexity of the situation initially, which meant that the customer ended up, effectively in a normal tenancy, and they very quickly started to get into difficulty from a financial point of view, from a rent point of view, from a bills point of view. And it took two of my team at the time, one of the housing officers and then one of our team who works in financial inclusion, to really get hold of the situation. And if you think about it from the individual's point of view, they'd come through the homeless route, had been given a home, but didn't have, in my view, the skills or the right support to enable that tenancy to be sustained. And what that meant for the individual was, if there wasn't support, intervention, or help, and the only place it could have come from was from us, the landlord, Places for People Scotland, that person would probably have ended up back in that cycle again. So we spent the two individuals at a local level in their community, found out what was going on, and put in a really strong support package for the individual. Now, what that meant was that a situation that looked like it was potentially going to be, disastrous for the customer ended up not being, because they had the right housing support. They then got themselves on the right financial support from government. They were supported by our teams who helped about money management, about bills, about how you effectively do the basics. But it was very intensive. So it was a lot of time it took us to do it, a lot of effort. And to be quite honest with you, the dedication of the two individuals in my team were the main reason that we managed to get to a solution. That person is still in their tenancy. I don't think we can say they're at a point you can say they're thriving, but they're living, they're supporting, that they're able to pay their bills. And what that story kind of showed to me in some ways was how, as a housing provider, we are effectively in that instance the safety net for that individual. We were the safety net, and those two members of staff were the heroes that picked it up, ran with it, and really helped that individual. But that might not be something that people would necessarily associate with a large landlord, that we can operate in a very individualized way when it's necessary. And I suppose that draws out this point that the first point I was going to really make was that when you get in your communities and you have boots on the ground, for want of a better phrase, you can really support your customers in a really positive way. In my view, the scale of the whole organization isn't that important. It's about how that organization deploys its resources and thinks about community and thinks about individuals. So just before COVID, we started the process of, right, we've got a number of constituent parts to our affordable housing business. We need to find ways to create more value for our customers, so we're not doing things in lots of different ways, have lots of different teams doing the same thing in different areas. So we went through an exercise where we centralized a load of things, quite common, and I won't bore you with the detail of that. But I think what our experience through that, and bearing in mind COVID then hit halfway through this process, was that in some areas it worked really, really well. So if you think about our back office, our human resources, our finance, our data, and all of our IT systems, all that kind of stuff worked very, very well. Moving to a more centralized approach, it gave us much better insight and much better understanding of what was going on. Bearing in mind, we're not in a perfect world, even now. So we were starting at, I guess, a pretty challenging base. However, I think what we learned through the process was that actually we lost an element of that localism, if you like. So, whether you call it over centralization or whatever, I don't really know. But we lost that connection we needed with communities in certain areas. Not in Scotland, I should add, but I think that was case in point in terms of what I'm going to talk about, because there was a circle wrapped around the Scottish business from a regulatory perspective. So we pulled in a lot of the services and got some great teamwork and got some great collaboration, but there was this niggle which was saying, I don't think, hand on heart, we can say that we truly understood what was going on in communities. And actually COVID was hitting at the same time, so that made it a lot harder for us to be present in our communities and really understand the challenges. So we had those two kind of things go on. So fast forward to I suppose what we're in the process of doing at the moment. So the model in Scotland that we had was focused on a number of things, but it was focused on reducing patch sizes for our neighbourhood staff. I think there's so much commentary out there at the moment about how hard it is for neighbourhood officers and similar roles on the front line at the moment. I completely subscribe to that. I've seen it myself. It's really hard, and workloads are going up, complexity is going up, and the amount of things that are coming through for those members of staff are going up. So we absolutely have to support the front line and find ways to do that. So reducing patch sizes, big priority. Also looking at how we reduce the layers. And this can be a little bit controversial at times, but when you look at a business like PFP that's built up over a number of years, you end up with lots and lots of layers of management. Now, I came through management, so I don't class myself as a layer. But the point being was we were really struggling with communication with the front line, transparency about what was going on the front line, what's happening out in our communities. And part of that challenge was, I think, the layers of management, that things were not distilling down in the right way. And the other part was that actually we hadn't really spent a huge amount thinking about how we communicate in a post-COVID world properly with our tenants now, and with our staff. Sorry. So We focused a lot on that, and then we spent an awful lot of time talking to the front line, and listening. Right, so that the stuff about hearing what's happening on the front line from the people who are out there doing it, seeing it for yourself is the best way to understand how business operates, and then actioning it and focusing on what do we do about changing things up and making your jobs easier. So I'll give you an example. When we got underneath a load of compliance stuff that again had been built up over the years, we found out that we were duplicating loads of compliance activity in our communities, absolutely loads, hundreds of hours was being wasted because it was being done by someone over here and someone over here. So by working again across the whole organization, we could say, right, this is what we have to do, this is who's doing it, and these are the things that are now additional that don't require to be duplicated. And that pulled out hundreds of hours for our frontline housing staff. And that's the kind of stuff that when you talk to frontline and say, guys, we've taken away all this stuff because you don't need to do it. Somebody else is actually doing it. You get big wins from the front line because they can actually then spend the time doing what they really need to do, which is supporting customers and communities. So where we've ended up now, we've just appointed, well, I say just actually, it's about 3 or 4 months. We've just appointed a new MD for communities in places for people. And that MD is being supported by regional directors. So what we've actually done is we've centralized a few years ago, and now we're focusing on a really strong regionalizational approach, which will mean that across the UK, we'll have 4 regional directors who will each hold full accountability for that region. And the scale ranges dependent on where you are. So, Scottish region is about 10,000 properties. The Northwest is about 30 odd. So we're talking, big regions. But what those guys will have is absolute accountability to the customers and to the front line as well. So those frontline staff understand that, they've got somewhere to go. So that's I suppose, the first big change that we're making. We're keeping a number of our services centralized because we feel that's the right thing to do from an efficiency point of view and doesn't need a regional flavor. So we can use our scale to create efficiency, which then allows us to put more staff on the front line. And I think that's, I suppose, where I'm leading all of this too, that our experience has shown that patch sizes have grown, but both through development and through movement to a scale which isn't ideal. And our biggest focus for our frontline staff is we're going to be reducing patch sizes. We're going to continue that journey over the next few years to make sure that patches become manageable. When you look at what our frontline guys do, when you listen to what they say, a lot of it you think, well, that's not best use of your time. It doesn't make jobs enjoyable. So we need to think about how you make sure that housing officers aren't just dealing with all the difficult stuff, that they get the positive parts of the role as well. I think that's really, really important that you get a mix. And taking this micro approach to your communities means that when you do have an example of that customer that we came across in Edinburgh, that you're able to preempt those challenges because you know your customer really well. You've got really good data that your frontline staff can understand, that you're joined up with repairs teams, with your financial inclusion teams, with your lettings team. So you've got one picture of the customer. And for me, the only way you can do that is investing in boots on the ground and investing in that presence. And that's the priority that we're taking forward at the moment. So we've got our regional directors in post. I'm sure I saw one of them pop up. So Kelly, it's good to have you here. But the next level down will purely be focusing on that element of how we manage our communities really well, how we invest in them. And as you may well know, PFP don't just do affordable housing. We've got leisure centres, thousands of staff operating leisure centres across the UK. So our strategy now is all about community. So as we move forward, how you look at community in the round. So you're not just looking at a housing element. You're thinking about well-being. You're thinking about the impact of mental health and employment and all these other things that come into a person's life, which do affect their housing and their ability to pay their rent, but I suppose might be seen as not just pure housing. So we're looking at all of those kind of things to make sure that I suppose customers of ours who really need us have the support that they need in the right place at the right time. So I suppose that's that's the pitch, I guess. I'd love to have a chat and hear people's views, and feel free to disagree with me as well. Because this is it's all about having a good chat, really. I think, isn't it?
Very much is, and I really appreciate kind of the overview and the update there. I know obviously when we spoke, it was, you talked about that journey through Scotland and then bringing it down to England and what's trying to change there. And I think it was also really interesting when we spoke about the realization in terms of the structure of the company, as you've mentioned already, kind of going, we've got too many people up here and not enough down here, and these are the people actually delivering the frontline work. And if this isn't populated enough. But you also mentioned there, just before I bring in Jan, you mentioned during your thing there that you're having, as everyone is, issues recruiting for housing officers, neighbourhood officers, housing managers, the 1,001 different terms we give people who go out and actually do the work on the ground. How are you finding that kind of change in patch size and change in approach is working for kind of recruitment and hiring? Is it making a difference for you? Because evidently you're trying to get more staff than you had before.
Yeah. So I think that our approach in Scotland saw that our retention, after we made changes in the neighbourhoods world, was far better. But there are also other elements, I think, with housing officer roles, because they're not particularly well paid in certain places. So we've had a real look at pay and benefits. And I'll give you an example about what PFP did around pay this year. Was the lowest paid staff in our organisation received the highest pay rises. So the highest paid staff got 0. The frontline guys got 10%, which, in the cost of living crisis, you might say, well, they're still impacted. But the principle of what we're doing is about fairness and the poor in the front line. And we've put this year our pay award front and centre in terms of that's what we're doing. So there are a number of things about retention, but it does strike me that when you're a housing officer and you have a bad day, it really is pretty shit. There's some really difficult things that people have to deal with, and that's the kind of the need. We need to support them, I suppose, is my point. So yeah, it's helped, but recruitment, my experience of recruitment across our affordable housing business is the frontline roles are difficult to recruit to, but it's actually more acute in our repairs side of the business, I think, than necessarily in housing.
There are challenges everywhere. I've never known recruitment be more of a challenge than it is now for everybody. So you're not alone in that, but it's certainly interesting to hear. And there's some questions actually regarding patch size and trauma-informed practice in the chat, which I'll come to in a moment. But Jan, I'm going to bring you in first. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, just checking that this works. Are you hearing me okay?
Absolutely fine.
Okay, because I'm on my phone. I'm on holiday, actually, so I'm on my phone rather than... and anyway, so listen...
Well, I appreciate you joining us from international waters.
No, south of England. Although, to be fair, places for people, I've got so many properties all over the place, I'm probably within 10 minutes... Nobody's further than 10 minutes away from a places for people property, I suspect. But anyway, look, I've been around for 55 years in public housing. So, Tom, welcome to the business, because you're basically a new boy. I was running estate-based management in Tower Hamlets in 1986 when we were creating estate bases covering only 1,500 properties. And it's not just about patch size. I'm interested to know what a housing officer is expected to do within the patch. That's, I think, a crucial bit of the conundrum, because the housing management compulsory competitive tendering in 96 started to take away from local housing officers like rent arrears and so on. And part of the balance between what a good housing officer can do locally and what's best done centrally is the battle that's been going on for years. And it's been made worse over the years because housing associations have generally been run by people who've never actually been on a council estate, never mind worked on one. And that's been part of the problem. So I welcome places of people joining the real world and getting back to the front line. But I think the other thing, just to say, this issue on communities, there's too much emphasis on communities. This kind of a concept that somehow everybody lives in a community just isn't true, because in many of your properties there'll be bits of other estates or bits of other areas where there isn't a places for people community, and that I think is a challenge that has to be tackled. I'll stop there, otherwise I'll go on for hours.
Thanks, Jan. Tom, back to you.
Thank you. No, I absolutely take your point. I think, or points. The bit about community is quite interesting. So I had a conversation with the City of Edinburgh Council, which was probably a couple of years ago, and the council were looking at how many different housing providers in Craigmillar. I don't know if any of you know it, but that's kind of the heart of our Edinburgh business. Really challenging part of Edinburgh, but very well managed by a really experienced team there. But when you looked at the different housing associations that were providing services and the same services in the same area, you're absolutely right that there was a fragmentation, which also means that you've got an inconsistency of what people receive. Our community hub there is open to everyone, so we don't. It's not a places for people community hub; it's a community hub. And I think for me the point is that, and drawing out from what you said, that having a joined up view of who's operating, how they're operating, and trying to get people to think together and work together is absolutely key. Because otherwise you lose cohesion. But I take your point. I mean, we use community in its widest sense, and I think that the other element you said about what the housing officers do, absolutely right. But that was, I suppose, my point about, we found that over time there was duplication of compliance work, of things that just didn't need to be done twice in a week because of the way the organisation effectively had grown. And I think that's that is the big key that says, for me, housing officers are there to support customers and to be the face of the organisation on the ground. That's the principal part. And they will deal with, one day ASB, another day potentially arrears. But again, our organisation has a separate team that deal with arrears and accounts. Now, over a period of time, I was with an organisation on the South Coast a couple of weeks ago, and their patch sizes were around 250. And the housing officers did everything. And I know there is another ongoing debate in the sector about, do you have, in my old word, functional approach, or do you have generalist approach where people do everything? I think our view is that over time, that generalist approach where housing officers take accountability up to the regional director of everything that's going on in their estate or in their community is absolutely the way to go. But we're a fair way off that at the moment. We're at the start of that deploying back into the front line, I think.
Thanks very much. And I liked the, when you and I have talked, it's very much, this is the start, as you've mentioned, at the start of the journey. This isn't kind of going, hey, look, we fixed it, we're there, but we're recognizing that this is what needs to change and we're doing something about it. Jubeen, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really interesting, Tom, and it's interesting to hear the sort of transformation efforts for such a large organisation with the geographical spread. I was interested in how you are approaching, or you as the organisation approaching the accreditation requirements that are coming up. Are you sort of starting to think about that in terms of housing managers needing to have their level 5? Is that something that you have started to kind of think about meaningfully?
Yeah, we have. We've not got a landing point on how we're going to approach it, but we're one, well aware of it, and two, trying to work through, I suppose, the meaning for our organisation. I think what I would say is that my experience in PFP of particularly our frontline housing guys are the vast majority are very well qualified and experienced. So I think on the front line, it's less of an issue because it's something that people have built up over time. I think as we look in more widely in the organisation, when you're going into kind of other management roles, it could be some challenge. So no, we're on it, but I definitely don't have any solutions as of right now.
And there's so much misinformation around it as well. Like, again, it really frustrated me, the qualification piece, because suddenly we go, right, we're going to do something, but we don't know who, we don't know when, we don't know how. It's a real challenge. Is it going to be managers? Well, the manager's the one that need the training. it's bizarre, and it's a really good point, particularly when you've got businesses the size of PFP that are, it's going to be a huge piece there. I was going to jump to the chat, but actually I've just seen Michael's raised his hand. So Michael, do come in.
Hi, it's just a quick question around. It's over that point of the qualifications, and it's just a real quick one. Does it not? Am I understanding it correctly that it will require secondary legislation for those parts to come in? And are we under? Can you hear me, by the way? Some of my headphones. Yeah, cool. Yeah, but it requires secondary legislation, and because we don't really know where that is at the moment. I don't know, and I'm trying to work it out for my organisation, which is Turning Point. So I'm sorry, it's kind of a little bit of an aside, but it's something that all of us are.
I think, like anything, isn't it? We're just waiting for more information. We're waiting to know exactly what it is we're meant to progress with, and then I think this whole thing's going to take years, to be honest with you. And I think it was almost, I hate to say it, it's almost sounded like a bit of a soundbite that's come out going, right, well, we're going to do this, and then no real idea on how.
It's just because obviously in May next year the election is going to happen, and where is it between September, October, and then it's kind of all open, because I'm trying to give advice to my ops board about it, and so I'm glad that I'm in the same boat as everybody else. That's good. I'm really.
You certainly are. What I can guarantee is, as soon as we do have information, there'll be a roundtable special thrown out immediately, because there's going to be a lot of people with questions. A few points have been raised in the chat. Anna Henderson, I'm Anna, now escalation lead at PA Housing. 20 years in housing in various roles. I've seen many different efforts at reorganisation and restructures, but find that the concept of community is diminishing both for residents and organisation. And I guess that ties in a little bit into what Jan mentioned before, which is communities now, you can have, very large buildings of multiple occupation, which have got multiple landlords working within them. And so community is a very difficult thing sometimes to fit in. Esther Barrett, who I know is from P3, question for you, Tom. Where do you feel trauma-informed practice fits into this? I mean, you've mentioned already there that, I guess your patch sizes are reducing. And actually, Kirsty's mentioned the next one, which is what is the new patch size? And I know that's something you're working towards. So information on that would be great. But last week's roundtable was on staff trauma. And when you've got a group director who's I guess responsible for that individual patch, how is trauma-informed practice working for PFP at the moment?
So I think that's a good question. I think that our approach with, so let me take it back. I talked a lot about communication and visibility, and frontline staff having the ability to escalate, to communicate, to talk openly about experiences. And this is something our group CEO brought in when he joined a year and a half ago. And I mean, when I explain it, it sounds a bit basic, but it works. So we use Yammer, which is, I guess, like Facebook, but for business, for those of you who haven't used it. But there's thousands of posts go through Yammer where you've got people talking about their day-to-day jobs, people talking about challenges they've had, people talking about their own personal experience and being vulnerable about things that have happened to them, and it's led from the top. So there's a really strong expectation from the executive on the senior leadership across the business that as leaders we're visible, we're vulnerable and open as leaders. So I did a post a little while ago about mental health and some stuff on that, which created a huge discussion around blokes and mental health and our inability to, sometimes, I'm talking from experience, actually communicate anything about it. So we're driving for a very open culture. So I don't know if it quite answers the question about trauma-informed practice, but I think the point is that we need all of our staff to feel as though they're supported, to feel as though they can raise issues, so we don't end up with things getting hidden or people being scared to raise things. And interestingly, one of the biggest challenges, and I had this myself, and it goes back years, but the idea that sometimes you don't like to take bad news forward, and you don't want to tell your boss or the exec or whoever, the board, about bad stuff that's going on because you think you'll get fired. We've had to turn that kind of culture on its head. because for a lot of people, they just don't want to communicate, and they prefer not to say. Whereas we're trying to say, no, do you know what? If you see something, don't walk past it. Do something about it. Tell somebody, raise it. Whatever you do, don't ignore it. So I've kind of got on a tangent a wee bit. I'm sorry. So I don't know if that kind of answers the question. I wasn't at your session last week, but our culture we're driving for is one of openness and transparency. It comes with its challenges, but it's far better than one of people being silenced and not able to raise things.
That was one of the massive points that came up last week, was it comes down to culture. So it's brilliant to hear that's being driven forward from top down, because a lot of time that's also one of the challenges that comes with it. What is the aim of the patch size? Is there a target in mind for what you're trying to get the patches down to?
So it's not simple as we have a singular patch size. If you average it out, where I'd like us to get to is 500. But if you look at kind of our ongoing drive, it will be continue to drive that down. So the problem is that there are some areas where we will have patches much smaller. Take Aberdeenshire is a great example. We have tiny patches there because of the geographical spread, the Highlands generally. But then if you go to Preston or Leeds, the patches will be bigger. But I suppose the point is there will be no diktat about from the business about patch size. We will talk to the local staff. We'll understand the challenges and the workload, because on paper you might have one community in Edinburgh that's 500 and another in Preston that's 500, but the one in Edinburgh has significant ASB, real issues around drugs, and the one in Preston doesn't. So it has to be designed with the people who are working in those communities involved, so we can understand what their experience is. Eventually we'll get to a stage, and we've got some new systems coming in later this year that will transform our kind of data and our analytics about what's happening and what people what's coming into the contact center and going through to the communities teams, etc. But in the meantime, it's got to be driven by the front line. It's got to be bottom up, not top down. So there will be no actual, this is our patch size, this is what it has to be.
Is that required more training for your management teams? Is that required training for your mid-level managers, as it were? Because it's quite a shift from a lot of ways that some housing providers have worked traditionally, is really giving, because one of the questions that's come up in the chat there was about how have managers adapted to support the level of autonomy you're giving to frontline staff, because that's, like I said, that's really flipping things on its head. Like I say, it's managing up, which is a skill unto itself.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And we've got a huge program of management development for all managers and leaders across the business. It kicked off about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it's exactly to drive that point home. When you think about values-led leadership and you think about doing the right thing, people know intrinsically what doing the right thing is, I think. But that doesn't mean that you feel able to do that within your role. So we're doing a huge amount of work. So every manager across the business will get training and support that's tailored to their individual circumstances. But it's hard, right? It's hard when you say to leaders, look, there is an open line to the chief executive if your frontline staff have some challenges and issues that they want to raise. It's the right thing to do. But I tell you, it can be scary, because if you think about the cultural challenges that I talked about earlier, you think, oh, am I gonna get in trouble if X happens? So you have two kind of behaviors. You have one which is, well, this is a direction of travel, and you know what? It's okay if things go wrong. It's what we do to fix them that matters. But then you'll have another mindset, which is, I need to stop that stuff happening. I don't want to see it. And that's the stuff that we need to give leaders and managers support in. That isn't, if something happens, bad things don't happen to you if you raise things and you fix them. And there's just seems to be, and I don't know if it's a sector thing or a PFP thing, but there seems to be this kind of worry about what might happen to people's jobs and careers. And if you try and take that away and give people a safe space, it makes it far better. But there's a long way to go. And the middle management, if you like, in that business, in our business, that's where, that's the group of people that need the biggest amounts of support as we move forward with the cultural change, I think.
I agree, and it's just brilliant to hear, because as you say, it is cultural, and the word culture has come up more times on this roundtable over the last 6 to 12 months than probably any other. But it's exactly that. If the culture isn't there, you can put all these initiatives, all this tech or anything that you want, but nothing's going to change. Just jumping back to the chat while no one's got their hands up at the moment. Anna had said, I think PFP is lucky to be able to influence aspects other than housing. Placemaking is essential to successfully rebuilding communities. And evidently this is one of the benefits of being a larger provider, having access to these kind of things. But it's very easy, I think, as well, for businesses to, for like, say, as I mentioned earlier, for publications and things to go after a large provider if there's one thing wrong, and kind of tainting the entire thing with one brush. And I think it's skewed maybe with some providers. I do think there's a level of us and them sometimes as smaller providers and big providers that is built over the last few years. And I'll definitely like to come back on that point in a bit. Ellie's question we've just been through. So Andrea Hogg, I was a neighbourhood coach. My patch was around 200 properties. The concept was fantastic and groundbreaking at the time. But sadly, the job became untenable for me, as the rest of the company sadly saw it as the dog's bodies in general go for. AFB was through the roof with little support. We started to have compliance thrown at us. We dealt with our own rent accounts up to NOSPs, and then we moved on to the whole lettings process. The salary was poor, morale was low. And I think that goes back a little bit to what you said earlier, is you can have as low a patch size as you want, but if the support isn't there, it doesn't matter, because you're going to be set up to fail.
Yeah.
Michael Scarisburg,
absolutely right.
Absolutely. I mean, Michael put in the chat there, recruiting to the front line. Does PFP have programs or apprenticeship opportunities to develop skills and capacity within your communities? Is there a focus on promoting diversity? And obviously, when we talk about the breadth of PFP, diversity's got to be a key thing to be able to be looked at right now.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, coming back on the patch size and thing, I think there is and again, I don't know if it's a sector thing or not, but from what I've seen, there's often a kind of default to the neighbourhood officer can do that. The neighbourhood officer can do that. And you get to a point where the answer actually is, well, no, they can't, because we've given them 200 other things that have come through. So I completely agree that, you've got to get the role sizing, the role, the details of what people are doing right. But you know what? And not all of my colleagues agree with this, but I think you also want a bit of creativity in there, because I think, you don't want to manage your housing officers or your housing staff like you might, a plumber, or, who's got a job to do, go and fixes the taps and then they go to the next job. That there has to be that ability to walk the communities and spend time there. And that means we want people who are creative and will think differently and aren't robots, I suppose is what I'm saying. Because it's about humans in the end, isn't it, all of this? So I think I'm completely on that board that, you can make it 100 properties, but if you've got too much to do, you've got too much to do. And I think, like I said, I think some days housing officer roles can be really thankless tasks. It's hard. I forgot what the other question was.
The other question was about kind of developing skills within the community and embracing diversity, and I guess more getting the level of patches that you've got and the people within your patches involved, because PFP, the size you are, diversity is going to be, I say, a key attribute for really understanding how your individual communities and patches work.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost that we do an awful lot of working with others and collaboration in our communities. So and a lot of that's driven by the local staff in terms of what communities need. So we work with Turning Point in Edinburgh and have a really successful collaboration there that started in Leith around alcohol and addiction. I know lots of people do this stuff. I know we're not the only people who do it, but I think the point is that we won't necessarily do things ourselves if there is somebody better or more expert to do that. And I should add that also means doing the housing management, or we will develop, but it doesn't always need to be owned by PFP. We think more social housing is the answer. And if that means that another smaller landlord wants to take on some few properties and we can help them do that, then, so be it. So there's that whole collaboration thing. When it comes to employment, and apprenticeships and stuff. We do a whole load of stuff in apprenticeships and trainees, and bringing people into the sector. It's actually quite hard, particularly in the housing side, I find. So housing officer apprenticeship type, or not even just graduate, but roles for young people as they come through. They're not that appealing roles, so we have to do something, I think, in the sector to try and draw people in, because they're actually great, but you do ask a lot of people, a lot from people. And if I take Edinburgh as an example, we've got 70 odd charities operate out of our community hub there. So there's employment, there's interview skills, there's all of the stuff that you would expect, I suppose, from us in a community hub. But again, it's not just for PFP. So we will encourage people into the right roles and employ people in our communities, if they're the right fit and have the right skills, and we will push that really hard. And we see a lot of people coming through that route. But equally, it's about other people in the community as well, not just PFP customers.
Cool. Before I go back to the chat, there's a number of things that come there. Lisa, great to have you with us. Do please come in.
Hi there. Just a question, going back to this responsibilities of the housing officer within the defined new patch size. I'm quite interested to learn what aspects of the job have remained centralised, as in arrears, lettings. What sort of levels have they remained at centralised to allow the housing officers to make the difference on the ground and to have the more time to spend in the patches?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose not from a centralised point of view, but from a functional organisational point of view, lettings is done by a lettings team. So obviously, in Scotland, we have a team, because it's slightly different how we need to do things up there than to England. But the lettings teams are aligned, I suppose, it's the best way to describe it, to regions, but not part of the regions. And the same goes for income collection. So we've checked, we're kind of trying to get rid of a lot of the language in that space at the moment around debt and stuff. So we call that customer accounts in places for people now. But that team, again, you've got a regional alignment, but we're not asking neighbourhood officers to drive to go and do arrears work at the moment. But I think that's one of those debates that I've had so many times since I've entered the sector. Should it be everything? Should it be very defined? Should they do sign? You can debate that with people every day. I suppose the one thing I would say that is interesting, I think, to a person, when I've been speaking to housing officers, there is a view that the guys want to do more. And would like more breadth. I haven't had anyone say, "Oh, actually, I don't want to do that, and I don't want to do this." So on the front line, there seems to be a draw for people wanting to do a little bit more. But that's where we are at the moment. But I think, as ever with these things, you need to test them and try it, and see how it lands. What we don't want to do is put everything onto the neighbourhood officer, and then they can't do what they need to do, and that's what we're trying to get away from, I suppose.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And I think, like you say, it's asking them what more they want to do. But again, as you've mentioned before, individually, because some people love ASB, some people can't stand it. So it's that level of, okay, yeah, you can take on more, you take arrears up to this level or ASB up to this level, but then you need specialists potentially if it's going through to court, because otherwise you haven't got the time to do your job. It's not necessarily a wish, it's time. We've got about 10 minutes left, and there's quite a few points in the chat. So I'm going to try and kind of do 1 minute quick fire through these, and we're going to do our best, Tom. So let's see how we get on. So a message from Claire. You spoke about data and good use of data. So was there analysis or appraisal of systems used and accessibility of that data? The separation of duties has led to specific systems, etc. And often the argument back from frontline has been they don't have access to or don't know how to use specific systems, compliance, mutual exchanges, transfers, rents, ASB. A 360 view and service isn't ideal for many, but need the technical infrastructure to support it. The flip side being the introduction of the systems has created the duplication you discussed and overcomplicated the functional approach.
100% agree. Now we're in the process of bringing a new CRM that will land in later this year, I expect, which is the start of giving people the 360 view that they need to do their job. So for the neighbourhood staff, when we get this when we get it landed and developed, they should be in a position that they can walk their neighborhoods and they can see the 360 view of the customer, of the property, you know, so to the point of, you know, if they bump into a customer and they say, when is my kitchen due to be done, that we have that information and it's there, and the neighborhood staff, neighborhood officers can see it. We're not there yet. We've had such challenges that, I mean, everyone has, haven't they? But we've had real challenges with data, legacy systems, multiple legacy systems. You know, it's really, really hard. But it's a massive, it's an absolutely massive challenge for us. The goal will be 360 view, and we're starting that quite soon, and it will be transformational for the frontline staff. Like, it would be absolutely great for them to be able to finally have the view that they need. But it won't just apply to those guys; it will apply to other members of staff as well. We're going to be using Salesforce, so it's a relatively intuitive platform. And it will be backed up behind the scenes. We'll have lots of other things that feed into it. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And I always feel my experience of spending time in housing offices always felt like, you know, it's almost like they've got one hand behind their back because they don't have the information in front of them to be able to do their jobs quickly. I remember the first time I was out with a housing officer years ago, we were sat in a car with a little dongle as she was trying to like find some stuff off of a laptop, off a system somewhere that she needed to make a decision about something. And, you know, that's where we need to get away from. That's what we need to get away from. But, you know, at the moment, yeah, it's tough, but we're in the business end, and it's one of my areas of responsibility. So, you know, I'm feeling the pain as we're bringing these things through now. But it will be great once we've got that view for staff.
And like I say, and the fact that it's being done at all, going, you know what, yes, it's going to cost X, but this is what we have to do our jobs properly is the key thing, and the fact it's being invested in. Question from Vuyo Halamama. Interesting insights. Thank you, Tom. RE reducing layers. Was there an increase in decision making or housing officers empowered to make decisions at the micro community level? And were there any challenges to get this supported by managers or other teams?
Yeah. So one of the things that came through loud and clear, and I don't know what other people's experiences are of this, is that getting stuff done, simple stuff done, was becoming harder for our frontline staff. So, you know, right, I should think of an example, but we need this bench replaced because it's been vandalized and smashed up. We made it quite hard for things like that to be done. So over the last, from the beginning of this financial year, we've put in this Get Stuff Done fund, £4 million, and it's 100% for things people see in their communities they need to get done quickly. Now, it then goes into a bit of governance to make sure that we've not got something planned through our asset investment area or from another part of the business. But effectively, it's about pace and it's about empowering the front line. The biggest challenge we've had is getting people to spend it, because it's counterintuitive for our staff to say, guys, you've now got a fund that you can draw upon to get all those annoying things that have needed done for years sorted. But we're really having to push to say, come on, you know, it's there now. It's something you asked for, and you had you know, that you fed back you needed. We've listened to you and we've put it in place. So that gives you that empowerment right on the front line, because whether it's a bike shed, whether it's a window, whether it's CCTV, doesn't matter. It's that the frontline staff decide what to do, and effectively, you know, if that's what the neighbourhood officer or another colleague says, then it's as good as approved. And you know that, and we trust their judgment. Sure, sometimes we might not get things right, but 99% of the time we will, and it means that the guys on the ground, guys and girls on the ground, are really feeling empowered to do stuff. So we needed to do something a bit radical in that space, and it's worked. And actually, what we're seeing is, you know, what used to happen was people would delegate upwards. So you'd end up. I remember when I first took on one of the areas a few months ago, I couldn't believe all these approvals that were coming through to me. It was coming up like 6 layers of management, and you go, well, why? But that's just how things had kind of always been done. So, you know, to say to people, it's your call, it's your budget, it's your call. That's quite a change as well.
Completely. And as you say, and that will be brilliant for managers of the future as well, as people learn that autonomy and stuff is great. But it's very difficult when you've been told no for years to suddenly go, no, it's okay to say yes, and going, well, can I?
Yeah. But I'll give you an example though. It was part of the reason we ended up putting it in. But I was out with one of our amazing house officers in Edinburgh, and one of the people anyone go out with, you just think absolutely brilliant. And he turned to me and said, "Oh, I need to get this thing sorted. I need to do a business case." And the thing that needed sorted, there was no way there was ever going to be a business case that stacked up for it, because it was something he thought he needed, but there wasn't a financial case for it in any way. So what are you going to do? It's like, well, it's on my list of things to do. I'll do the business case and then I'll send it off to whoever, and then hopefully it will get approved, and then it will get done, in a year or so. And that was the kind of realization, which was, hold on a minute, this is something which a business of our size can quite easily procure and get done in a couple of hours work. What we don't want is our neighborhood officer busy trying to write business cases to get, I think it was a bike shed from memory, but for something like that, that's what we need to move on from. And that was, I guess, the start of our thinking, which said we have to find ways to unlock all of this, because that doesn't need to go through all of these approvals. It just needs done.
I know a couple of people are having to bounce, so I'm going to try and fly through these as soon as possible. Michael Scarisbrick, are the changes being applied to PFP Living Plus?
So Living Plus is slightly separate for us. So we're not regionalising Living Plus because of the specialism. So there is a Tom Brown is our director of Living Plus. So it sits alongside. So Tom sits alongside the regional directors in our organisation. But Living Plus will continue to be run as it has done. Although when I just talked about getting stuff done, that fund also applies to Living Plus staff. So we've kind of circled it a bit because it's different.
Brilliant. How do you think this will affect your current resources, and do you envisage costs going up? That's from Kirsty Ellis.
Yes and no. So I think that I talked briefly about how we set up at management and senior level. So we've made some changes in there over the last 6 months, which have helped facilitate the deployment of more staff. But I think if we need to do it and it needs to cost more, then so be it. Would be my view. The reality is we need to make sure our delivery is right. So, if that means that, you have to have a challenging chat with your CFO about margins, or, you have to look at the whole business, then so be it. So, the first case is how do we manage with what we've got? But I think that there is absolutely a driver that sometimes you have to say things are going to be more expensive if we want to do more.
Anna Henderson has said they're bringing independent living into neighbourhoods for making patches smaller, but there are challenges with residents and stakeholders seeing them separate entities. I think that touched a little bit on what you said before, even though they're the same communities. It's an interesting point. But there was a question from Lara. I wonder if the changes that Tom has summarised are reflected positively in residents' feedback. How has the level and nature of residents' complaints changed?
That's a challenging one. Thank you, Lara. I think the vast majority of what we're getting from a complaints point of view is around repairs at the moment. So the neighbourhood empowerment and driving the regional approach, and part of that is to get our leadership much more closely aligned to what's happening in their neighbourhood, so they understand what's happening with repairs sooner. And so these big complaints, well, they're not necessarily big complaints, but the complaints that come through around repairs, they get solved by the local staff before they end up becoming a problem. So that's the principle. It's not flowing through in our numbers yet, although this model that I've talked about has been in play in Scotland for a couple of years, and the complaint count there and the general satisfaction there is definitely stronger. But there could be other reasons for that. The expectation is that once you've got that person in your community who you can trust and is there to support you and help you fix things, a lot of the going into the big complaints process will not be necessary, because we'll be preempting them and fixing things before they become disasters, really.
But obviously it's an ongoing challenge, particularly with the tenant services managers and everything else going on over the next year. So it'll be interesting to see. Absolutely. Maybe not next year's, but the year after, in terms of how they work on year by year. Michelle had said it's systemic change that needs to shift the culture. For the long-term solution, the only option is to go back to the original event to stop the patterns and issues reoccurring. Stacey had said, great update and summary of the changes. Michelle said, are you aware of how many PFP customers work for the organisation?
Not off the top of my head. I know we do have customers work for the business. I couldn't tell you how many.
Quick question from Lara. You have a board of 11 people, 10 are white and 9 are male. What are you doing to have a board that better reflects the demographics of their tenant staff and communities they serve? Nice, easy questions for you today, Tom.
I know, and I've got a board chairman that sits above me as well, so I have to be very careful, don't I? I think I take the point. I mean, it is what it is in terms of where we are today. It has to change. We've been doing an awful lot of work around our customer board. And what we call it a national customer group, but effectively that's our customer panel. And we're in the process of setting up regional panels that will be representative or far more representative of our customer base in said regions. So I think that it doesn't directly answer the question because I don't have the answer for what we're doing at board level, but from how do we make sure customers are engaged more strongly and it's more representative? We've got a whole panel and piece of work that's flowing through there, and we'll pay those customers to join the panel as well for their time. So we're taking that side of things really, really seriously, and it has to be representative. But yeah, I can't talk for board recruitment. It just doesn't sit within my world, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. Richard Saunders, we have the housing data standards created by HACT, where a collective group of housing associations joined forces to work and debate the data standards. Would this work to create a sector blueprint where we can all collaborate to draft a best practice?
Yes.
Michael Scarisbrook, anyone remember the ferret? I don't know what that is, so apologies.
I hope it's not a hidden beard joke that me and you don't know about.
It's not. It was a little kind of handheld thing that gave housing benefit advice back in about the late 90s and early 2000s. It's an ancient piece of technology, but it reminds me of the dongle you were talking about before.
Okay. Claire had said, I'm sorry I have to leave early. She's been in the sector for 20 years and I've seen that cycle from specialist to generalist over and over again. And then there were a number of thanks in the group today. So thank you everyone who has been able to attend. I know we've run a few minutes over, so thanks everybody who's been able to stay with us through the entire piece today. Tom, just a final kind of point from yourself. I know that you've been relatively new to the sector in terms of, as you say, about 5 years. Coming from the other side, but even during that 5 years, we've had a pandemic, we've had huge shifts, we've had probably about 4 or 5 policy changes during that time as well, and about 50 housing ministers. From your side, I guess, what would you give advice to, in terms of the journey that PFP's gone, in terms of the journey you've gone from the Scottish side down to England now, and the problems you've seen. And I guess it's quite nice to speak to someone who's kind of got maybe a fresh perspective at a senior leadership perspective, because sometimes people have been in their positions for a long, long time. What do people need to change now? Where do they need to start in order to really start making the changes that are imperative that we see?
So, I mean, I've banged on about this all morning, haven't I? But number one, you've got to listen to your front line. You've got to listen to the staff out there in the communities who are doing the doing. That is imperative. It's hard. Some people do it really well, others don't. It's tough and it's cultural and it takes time and it's difficult. But the point being is we've all got people out there in our communities right now doing their roles. The second thing is, how do you find a way to make sure that over the years of things changing and as taking on more, that we've got streamlined thinking and processes, so we don't do, as I talked about, the duplication of, we don't double up on things and not know about it. So we can then shape down actually how we're operating. And the third thing is that, I've not been around some of the cycles that people have talked about here of, do you centralize, do you not, do you have housing officers do everything, do you not? But there is no way you can get around having boots on the ground in your communities. And the more that's coming at us as a sector, you've mentioned it, damp and mold, all of the COVID stuff, decarbonisation. There's just wave after wave, isn't there? Things coming. But for me, as really focusing on making sure you've got enough people in your communities with their eyes open, working with customers is absolutely key. So that story I told you about at the start, in 5 years' time, that would still happen. And that's, for me, it's all driven about people. It can be supported by good central services, good data, and all of those things, but it's your frontline people that matter.
Thank you very, very much. I know we've discussed everything from diversity to qualifications to everything in between today, but Tom, thank you for dealing with a number of questions fired your way. I hope everyone got the same level of kind of enjoyment out of it, but also kind of insight, I think, into realizing that it doesn't matter on the size of your business. There is stuff that you can do, and we need to work collaboratively to make this work. And our big providers are the ones that can maybe lead the way on that. Tying in quite nicely to what we've discussed today, next week, Jo Leckie is joining us, who runs Big Picture Training, does a lot of work in kind of that housing, customer service-led value work. So looking forward to having her on. But for now, Tom, I just want to say a big thank you to you, to Places for People, for coming on, and look forward to hopefully meeting a number of you again at future roundtables. If you'd like to get registered for all the mailing list, etc., please just reach out. But for now, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And cheers to you, Tom. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, folks. Bye.
Cheers.